All right, so we've got a good one for you today. Remember that Mr. Beast challenge we talked about? The one where he drops people in the wilderness? You guys wanted the full breakdown, so that's what we're doing. Survival tactics, group dynamics, the whole shebang.
And don't forget the psychology of it all.
Oh, right. That too.
Yeah.
Because it's not just about surviving, it's about winning.
Right.
And not just winning as a team,
Exactly.
but potentially taking yourself out of the running if it means a better chance at some cash.
It's a fascinating dilemma, really. Do you prioritize the collective good or look out for number one?
Well, Mr. Beast doesn't waste any time throwing that curveball. We've got our 10 contestants, 5 men, 5 women dropped in separate locations. Last one standing on their team gets a cut of 500 grand. But here's the kicker. You can tap out anytime. And if your team wins, you still get a piece of the pie.
Yeah. Talk about pressure.
Right. I'd be second-guessing myself from minute one.
Well, speaking of second guessing, we see that play out right away in their reactions.
Oh, yeah, I remember this. It's like night and day, the men versus the women.
The guys, they're all bravado at the start. We're going to crush this, all that jazz. Meanwhile, the women are thinking strategically from the get-go. Water sources, shelter.
Practical stuff. Which, let's be honest, is what often gets overlooked when you're focused on being the toughest one out there.
Exactly. And those early decisions can make or break you.
For real. I mean, one look at the shelters they built, and you could tell who came to win. That shelter the women's team put together, honestly, Pinterest-worthy.
No kidding. It was impressive. And the men's, well, let's just say they had a different approach.
If you can even call it a shelter approach.
Pretty much. But hey, different strokes for different folks, right?
True, true. Though I think I know which one I'd rather be in if a storm rolled through, which, spoiler alert, it totally does.
Right.
But we'll save that for later.
Right, gotta keep them hooked.
Always. But before that storm hits, we start seeing the women making some power moves. Specifically, some of them choose to tap out early.
And that's where the real strategy comes in. They're already crunching the numbers. Fewer people mean their supplies last longer.
Plus, they've got that awesome shelter, so they're probably feeling pretty confident about their chances.
Exactly. It's a gamble, but a calculated one. They're essentially betting on the strength of their remaining team members.
And I'm guessing on their ability to, to actually survive in the wild.
Which brings us to the first big challenge. Food. Mr. Beast has them doing an archery contest, because who needs bows and arrows when you've got, like, berries and stuff?
Right. Turns out, having someone who can actually hit a target becomes a pretty valuable skill. And guess who was prepared for that?
The women. With their strategic exits, they basically stacked the deck in their favor. They had an actual archer on their team.
Talk about thinking ahead. It just goes to show sometimes a little planning can give you a major edge.
But just when you think they've got it figured out, the wilderness throws them a curveball. Or rather, a rainstorm. A big one.
And this, my friend, is where that shelter situation gets real interesting.
Oh yeah, remember how we were admiring the women's deluxe accommodations? Well, this is where that foresight pays off. They're high and dry, riding out the storm in relative comfort. The guys, not so much.
Gotta imagine that does something to morale. I mean, I get grumpy if I have to walk the dog in a drizzle.
Absolutely. And that's part of what makes this whole thing so fascinating to unpack. It's not just about surviving the elements, it's about the psychological game.
Totally. Because even with a great shelter, that tap-out option is still looming, and we see more contestants crack. Some because they're genuinely struggling, others well.
Let's just say the allure of guaranteed cash is hard to resist for some.
It's like, do you tough it out for a chance at the whole pot, or play it safe and take what you can get? What would you do?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And I think it reveals a lot about someone's risk tolerance. Are you wired to endure for a bigger reward, or is certainty more your style?
Probably depends on the day, to be honest.
Yeah.
But speaking of things that test your nerve,
Yeah.
how about a surprise bear encounter?
Oh yeah, can't forget about that little detail. The men's team gets a very close encounter of the furry kind.
And suddenly, building a fire feels less important than, not becoming bear food.
Exactly. It injects this element of primal fear that's hard to shake, even if you know you're being filmed for a YouTube challenge.
Right. You're still out there in the wild, and anything can happen. Which brings us to our final two contenders, Phaedra from the women's team and TJ from the men's team. And this is where the dynamic shifts again.
Because now they're not just competing against each other, they're dealing with the weight of being totally alone.
Which, I don't know, is that harder or easier than being part of a group? On the one hand, no more personality clashes, all right. But on the other hand, all that solitude.
It's a fascinating psychological tightrope, and honestly, we see them both react in totally different ways.
Phaedra, she seems to find a rhythm with it, almost like being alone gives her strength.
While TJ, you can tell the isolation starts to get to him.
The family visits were really telling, I thought.
Oh, for sure. Mr. Beast brings their loved ones out for these emotional reunions right in the middle of the challenge.
And for Phaedra, it's like this burst of energy. Seeing her family reminds her why she's doing this,
But for TJ, it seems to have the opposite effect. It's like it makes him miss home more.
which is so interesting, right?
Right.
Same experience, totally different outcomes. Just shows how much of this is mental.
100%. And then, just as things were reaching a boiling point, Mr. Beast throws in another curveball.
Oh yeah, the greed challenge. TJ, he's feeling very confident at this point, so he tries to negotiate a private chef.
Bold move.
Right, he's basically assuming he's got this in the bag.
And that, my friend, is where things get really interesting.
Turns out that chef negotiation wasn't exactly TJ's best move.
Not even close.
Because remember all those side challenges Phaedra was winning?
Oh yeah, the ones TJ basically ignored.
Those weren't just for fun.
Nope, Phaedra was playing the long game.
While TJ's dreaming of gourmet meals, she's quietly stocking up on supplies.
Talk about strategic thinking.
It's like, sometimes the best strategy is the one nobody sees coming.
Absolutely no need for grandstanding when you're quietly outmaneuvering the competition.
And that's Phaedra's secret weapon, you know? That quiet determination.
She's got her hidden reserves, she's rationing, all while TJ's scrambling for scraps.
And the best part is TJ is totally clueless.
Oh yeah, he's got no idea.
He's so sure he's going to win, he throws away a prize opportunity. And guess what?
Let me guess, Phaedra already snatched it up.
Days ago. Talk about adding insult to injury.
It's brutal, but it's a fantastic example of what happens when overconfidence takes over.
He was so busy assuming he had it in the bag, he didn't even see the bigger picture.
And, you know, we've all been there.
Oh, absolutely. We get so caught up in our own head, we miss what's right in front of us.
Human nature, right?
It really is.
Yeah.
But in this case, it makes for some seriously good TV.
Or YouTube, I guess.
Right. But you get what I mean.
Totally. And as we get closer to that finish line, it's clear this isn't just about outlasting the competition for Phaedra.
It's about outsmarting them.
Exactly. And she does.
She totally crushes that final challenge.
Where's this phrase there?
Honestly, it's inspiring in a way.
Totally agree. It proves that planning, adaptability, and yes, a little luck can go a long way.
This whole thing has been one big lesson, really.
Right. Wilderness survival, it's a mental game just as much as a physical one.
More, even.
You said it. Stay calm, adapt to whatever gets thrown your way, and don't lose sight of your goals.
Words to live by, my friend.
Couldn't agree more.
So we've seen how it all went down. Now the real question is, what would you have done?
Would you have built that epic shelter? Would you have cracked under the pressure?
Would you have tapped out for a quick payday or held on for the big win?
Lots to think about.
That's what these deep dives are all about, right? Getting us to think about these situations, how we react to pressure, the choices we make when the stakes are high.
Because let's face it, life can feel like a wilderness challenge sometimes.
And sometimes it's the quiet strategists who come out on top.
You got that right.